So where do we start? So for something that can be as easy as a cup of noodles, making ramen is actually beautifully complicated. There are 5 equally important components when building a bowl of ramen from scratch. The broth. There's plenty of options to choose from here. The simplest coming from that dehydrated pack of instant broth or the paste, just adding boiling water. Just for those times you need that quick fix. All the way to that 12-hour tonkatsu style broth that we're doing here today. And I can just hear all the comments already. Are you crazy? Who has the time? But let's face it, guys, you are watching a cooking channel. And this is how it's done from scratch. So bear with me. Okay guys, for the broth, I'm using 4 pounds of pork hocks. You want to put them into a pot and cover them with water. Bring that up to a boil, and you want to remove any of that scum that comes off of the bones. This helps take away that strong barnyard-like smell. Next, you want to rinse off the bones in cold water. Fill up your pot again with water and bring it to a boil. Now we're going to add our aromatics. We're going to start with a bunch of scallions, 1 carrot, 1 white onion, a handful of dried shiitakes, 2 knobs of fresh ginger, peeled and sliced. Also some shiitake stems and a handful of peeled garlic. Bring that up to a rolling boil and cover it with a lid. We're gonna let that go for about 8 to 12 hours. In this case, it took about 9 to get it to where I wanted it. Stirring occasionally and adding water as needed. We basically want all that meat and cartilage to melt off the bone. Next, we want to pass that through a fine strainer. This is good shit, brother. The tare. This is where the umami and the seasoning for the soup comes together. Miso paste, dried dashi powder, and other flavorings are a great alternative here. You have full control and can adjust as you like. But right here is where you can give your soup a touch of your own personality. This step is also one of the least time consuming, so I really recommend giving some extra focus here. Okay, we're gonna add 3 2-inch pieces of this kombu, a handful of bonito flakes. Mix that in. You don't want it to come to a boil. Let that steep for about 15 minutes and strain it out. Put that back into the pot. Cup of soy, cup of mirin, cup of dry sake, some crushed garlic, some dried shiitake mushrooms, and some chopped up ginger. And let that boil, let that reduce for a little bit. Give it a taste. Adjust the seasoning. It's going to be really intense. I finished it off with a little rice vinegar. I think the dish is going to need a little acid. Yeah, strain that off and ready to use. For the noodle, an alkaline-based noodle. The alkaline, in my case, I'm creating a more concentrated baking soda, basically by slowly baking it down for about an hour at about 300 degrees. The alkalinity gives strength to the noodle and makes the noodle a little slippery. Nowadays, good noodles are actually quite accessible in your regular Asian supermarket and pretty much everywhere online. A good brand I found close by is called Sun Noodles. They're actually based right here in New York, and they're excellent. But I will show you how to make them from scratch today. Okay guys, 500 grams of bread flour, and we're gonna dissolve 5 grams of our concentrated baking soda carefully in 200 grams of cold water with 5 grams of salt. This stuff can irritate your skin, so I would recommend gloves while handling. Goggles wouldn't hurt either. Once that's all dissolved in water, you can slowly drizzle that into your flour. A little bit at a time and rapidly mix that in to hydrate the flour. I'm using a chopstick here. I suppose a fork could work too. Get that all together and throw it in an airtight bag and pop it in the fridge for about an hour. Let the glutens relax. This will make it easier to work with the dough and it'll come together a little better. This dough is very low hydration, so it was a little tough to knead and roll out, but take your time, it'll come together. I'm using a rolling pin to laminate it, then get it back down to the right thickness to fit through my pasta roller. Exactly the same process as Italian pasta here, but it just takes a little longer. I'm going down to a number 5 setting on this KitchenAid attachment. And then we're going to run it through the spaghetti cutter. And boom. I would have loved for the sheets to be a little smoother here, but the texture and the chew on the noodle was fantastic. So just a little more practice and a little more love. the toppings. This brings textures, volume to the dish, transforming it from a simple noodle soup to a full-on satisfying meal. This is also a great way to utilize whatever's in season. Traditional tonkatsu ramen consists of 2 main toppings, the slow-cooked pork belly with crispy skin, and that soft-boiled or poached egg. For vegetables today, because they're really in season, I'm going with some asparagus, some shiitake, some roasted shiitake mushrooms. What the fuck else did I do? And that classic sheet of nori. Alright guys, the pork belly. This thing was pretty large, so I split it in half. And I removed some of the skin on the bottom where it overlaps when you roll it. Soggy skin is gross. Alright, now we score the meat. It helps the seasoning penetrate a little better. Sprinkle a little bit of salt, some soy sauce, a little grated garlic, a touch of sugar, some silk chili. Smoked paprika works very nice here as well. Some cumin, a little ground cinnamon, and rub that in good, guys. Now we're going to tightly roll this bad boy. You see where the skin overlaps here. There you go. And now we're going to tie it off. I do it in about 1.5 inch increments here.
You didn't want people with smoke coming in. You didn't want people.
Okay guys, now grab a roasting pan. I use a cooling rack for this kind of thing. Makes it a little easier to remove when the meat is hot. And then we're going to add about 1.5 cups of soy sauce and fill up the water to about halfway up the pork belly. That's a classic braise. Oh man, look at these bad boys. Look at the skin on these things. It was unbelievable. Oh yeah, and I scored the skin too. It helps the fat render out a little quicker. Dude, this thing was so hard to cut, to break through that skin. But take your time. The knife will go through. I use a bread knife. Oh man, look at that thing. Juicy. Okay guys, the eggs are pretty easy. We're doing a 7-minute boil here. Temper your eggs before you drop them in. Set a timer, don't forget. While they're cooking, set up an ice bath so we can quickly transfer it over. Cool them down, stop the cooking process. Take your time peeling. You want a nice even. We don't want the egg all broken up. And boom. The marinade is soy sauce, sake, and mirin, and covered with water just to cover the egg. And we're doing a quick blanch of this asparagus, some heavily salted water, and the same thing as the eggs. You want to get an ice bath ready. Keeps the color, stops the cooking. And then we're just going to peel these things up. Use a regular vegetable peeler. And I'm going to make a nice little asparagus salad. Some rice vinegar, some sesame oil, some soy sauce. Mix that all in good. Sprinkle with a little black sesame. And season to taste. This was really good. Next, we're going to roast our shiitakes. Just slice them up. Line a baking sheet with some oil. Sprinkle with a little bit of salt, some black pepper, and just coat them in oil. I went a little too far on them, but they actually worked out. They rehydrated in the broth, so it worked out very nice. Next, our next garnish is just finely chopped some scallions. And then the nori paper. This is kind of tricky to cut, but just use your knife and go straight down. Line it up with each other. Next, the infused aromatic oil. This gives the soup a bit more complexity of flavor, and you can really be creative here as well. I mean, your options are endless. Today, I'm going with the crunchy chili garlic oil, and I think you're gonna love it. All right, time for the assembly, guys. You wanna get a pot of salted water up to a boil for the pasta. I use a strainer here as well, some chopsticks. Makes the job a lot easier. Get all your condiments ready, all your condiments lined up. This is your mise right here. You want it all very accessible to you while you're building your bowl. So for the tare, I used about 2 or 3 of those big spoons, and then 2 or 3 of those ladles of broth. Just adjust the seasoning, adjust the amount of broth to your taste, because the tate is very concentrated, so I would recommend just doing a bowl on its own and then just adjust as you need. That's the beauty of the tate. You can add as much, you can add as little as you want. And the rest is just artwork, man. That's why this is a main reason why I love ramen. I love building a bowl of ramen too. It's just it's so pretty. The 7-minute egg was just so perfect. The infused oil just adds so much depth of flavor. It's just amazing.
Wow.
Ramen really changed for me around the time I was in culinary school. This was around the time where I had my first bowl of Momofuku ramen. You guys probably remember, but at the time David Chang was really blowing up. This place really changed the game for me back then. And while we're talking about it, probably for the entire industry. Without a doubt, there's probably more traditional ramen shops in New York, but at the time, Momofuku was fucking groundbreaking. And that really motivated me at the time to explore different ingredients and just to try new things, to be just to be free and creative, and to explore different styles of cooking. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and hopefully I can give you guys a touch of inspiration that this bowl initially gave me.